So I'm here with Kohji from the Parallel team, who is the founder and lead game designer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what my title is. You can, like, my LinkedIn says head of game design and development, but like, I just tell people that make the games fun. And I'm a co-founder. There's a whole bunch of us.
Okay.
We've got an army of founders.
How many founders is there?
6.
Okay.
6. Although there's, I guess, like an unofficial 7th founder, which is Chad Hurley, also the actual founder of YouTube. He came on really early. So he's kind of like our 7th musketeer or whatever.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. And I remember, I think one of the first times we met, you mentioned that a lot of you guys were kind of like you were friends, right? You guys are friends from Toronto, and you kind of got together with the vision, I suppose. And is that right? You all kind of came from the same neighborhood, or how did all that, what brought you guys together?
Yeah, so we've been friends for many years. Me and our and Sasha, we went to school together. Oh, right. So like we've been friends for a long time. We actually live like 5 minutes away from one another, hang out all the time. And then and Paul as well. Paul went to school with us as well. And then we kind of have like gone through some other ventures and brought people on as part of those ventures to, Sasha's built some companies and brought people on to work at those companies. And it was the people who we brought on that we like meshed with, we would go out for drinks with and whatever. They were obviously very talented, that helps, but the people that we like got along with and would actually like invite to our house, our families would get together, that sort of stuff, that have kind of stuck around. And even when those ventures didn't work and we all kind of went our separate ways, we would still see each other on a regular basis. And then those are the guys that ended up being the other founders of the company.
It's really interesting, man. I have a lot of empathy for that. My background with my co-founder is we've been also in school together 30 odd years ago, and a lot of the folks that we brought on, especially the people who are really invested in the long-term vision, are people that we've got cultivated personal relationships before the project. In some cases during the project as well. There's nothing like getting to know someone in the trench, right? Yeah. But there's something very special about doing it with people who you trust like that, isn't there?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, especially in the early days, but I'm sure some of our employees would say it continues on now. Like working at Parallel is absolute chaos, and in the best possible way. But you are responsible for your piece and anything else that you want to help with. And it's not as if I'm pulling people in and being like, help me here or whatever. It's just like you got to find a way to make yourself useful, and so you have to be the type of person who just like wants to grab something and run with it.
Yeah.
And some people know us for the card game, right? But then there's other people who are talking about Colony, and there's people who are talking about Wayfinder, and those are all pretty separate things. And in order to be able to like excel at all 3 of those things, we need people who are just willing to grab their piece of whatever those 3 things is that they do and just do it without middle management or what have you, because like we move too quickly to like need to worry about that stuff.
Yes. So. Interesting, man. And that chaos that you guys are putting together yields these really interesting results because you're working at the frontier of a lot of emerging technologies. You're doing some bonkers shit that like most people haven't even scratched the surface with, What are the things that are the most batshit crazy that you're building?
It feels like all of it, honestly. I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Again, it goes back to what we were saying before, is when that Google Stanford paper came out about, they built that AI like office and just wanted to see what happened. Our head of AI, Adrian, he and his team saw that paper and were like, let's try and rebuild this. They reverse engineered it and set it in the parallel world. And it wasn't for any reason other than like, this is a cool thing that we're interested in. And that's where Colony kind of came from, right? But it was because, again, he, like in his self-directed way, was just like, I'm going to try and do this thing, And then we looked at him, we were like, holy shit, this is like super interesting. But like, I bring it to Colony because it feels batshit crazy. It's almost, the game, as of right now anyway, defies genre as far as I can tell. Like there's not a lot of games that I'm looking at pulling examples from, right? So like Parallel was a game that I took all of my favorite elements from the card games that I love and smashed them together and added, our own little flavoring or whatever. But Colony isn't like, I'm going to take elements from these games and smash them together, because it's, as you know for sure, like what AI games are out there that you can like draw from. Obviously there's like minor elements that you can take from stuff that you like, and narrative is always important, and those things exist in a whole bunch of games. But like, how do you build something when you can't predict what the outcomes that you'll get from the machine are, right? So, yeah, it just seems batshit crazy to try and draw a box around something that like we don't even know the form of yet.
One of the games that jumped to mind when I think about colony simulations was, now it looks incredibly different, but I wonder if you played RimWorld or games like that much.
Yeah. So that's funny that you say that. Actually, we reference the games that we reference a lot when it comes to Colony. I just finished saying that we don't reference anything, but no, the games that we reference a lot when it comes to Colony are The Sims is a big one, Black and White is a big one, Don't Starve is a big one, and RimWorld is a huge one.
Okay.
Because RimWorld's the type of game where like you have a lot of freedom to do a lot of different things and then see what the outcomes of those things are. And so Colony is definitely like that. It's just the twist is like none of those outcomes are or majority of those outcomes aren't pre-programmed. Like in Colony, we've given the AI the ability to like essentially write its own code into the game, and it's just like
that is so bonkers. Like that's a particularly interesting experiment, and I'm personally looking forward to what results that's going to yield, because it opens up a whole new really way of thinking about games, actually. Like it definitely disrupts genre, but perhaps it goes even a little bit further than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, don't tell anybody. I know this is being recorded, but the little cheat code that we use, right, or that I use as far as like game design is concerned, is like you look at things like games that require theater of the mind, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons is a perfect example, because there's a bunch of stuff laid out in a bunch of books that are like, here are the things in the game, but you can use that stuff to create things that didn't exist in those books, right? Because of the way the rule set is structured. You roll these dice and you see the outcome, and like, yeah, maybe you beat the space monster when it was supposed to be a dragon or whatever it is, right? Like, so people have been playing games that have been like sort of creative for years. It's now, how do you take those things in a way that like used to use the human brain, and now you use the computer brain in a way that's like actual intelligible in a game loop on the computer, as opposed to like a pen and paper role-playing game. So like we borrowed a lot from some of those role-playing games, and I've spent, like, my gaming background is actually more on the sort of tabletop board game, card game, RPG side than it is like the digital side of things. And so we've taken a lot from that, including a lot of people probably don't know this, but we have an AI that governs the world of Colony that isn't the players' AIs. And we've like nicknamed it the Dungeon Master AI, because what it does, in the same way that in Dungeons and Dragons you have a Dungeon Master, it determines whether or not certain actions should or shouldn't be allowed to be taken, whether or not certain items should or should not belong to that world. Because like, does it make sense that in parallel there's a blaster rifle? Sure. Does it make sense that there's like a inflatable, flamingo tube or whatever for you to swim with? Maybe not. Like we're in the middle of a war or something. So like, there has to be something, if players can create anything, there has to be something that determines whether it fits into the world. And so we have this other AI agent doing that. And so it's a bit of I like to say it's like a cheat code, but it's a bit of a way of sort of making sure that people can do a lot of things without completely breaking immersion.
Nice, yeah, and keeping that cohesion. Yeah. Really interesting. And one of the other fascinating aspects of, I think, Colony, as well as what you guys are doing broadly, has been what I've been reading about Wayfinder. So tell me a little bit about Wayfinder. So like, I don't have a huge amount of background. I think there was a white paper which I've been dipping in and out of recently, but I'd love to get the inside scoop on what it is. Obviously AI agents has been a hotly discussed narrative inside of not just Web3 games, but Web3 broadly speaking.
Yeah.
You guys have built a solution which is addressing some of the things that are being discussed. So yeah, tell me about it.
Just take the white paper, put it in a GPT and say like, what do I need to know about this? Okay, so Wayfinder came out as a bit of a happy accident from Colony. So outside of all the things that I just mentioned, in Colony, all of the agents will have their own wallets, 6551 wallets, and all of the items between them will be transacting on chain. And in order to do that, we needed to build something that would allow us to do that autonomously whenever these AI agents wanted to trade things with one another or sell things or whatever. And so we built this bit for Colony that runs on Solana now, that like they can do all their on-chain transactions. And we realized, like, wait a second, like, why are we limiting it to this game? We built these AIs that have intent to trade and sell and buy things on chain. There's probably like a larger implication here that we're not really like, we haven't fully baked into this thing. And then we realized, okay, like, let's make this a tool that people can use outside of the game. So like, rather than talking to your like parallel spaceman, right? You can just use natural language to talk to an AI and say, hey, spin me up an ETH wallet. And then you deposit ETH. And then you say, okay, bridge that ETH to base or whatever, okay? And then like buy me some degen, and or whatever. Like, I'm not saying use it for shitcoining, but you can use it for whatever you want. But basically, you just tell it what you want it to do, and with very little need for the actual end user to know how to do these things, it will be able to navigate those things for you and sort of make it all simple. Because I don't know about you, but like when I sign stuff with my wallet, I see the thing that MetaMask is spitting out, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck this says. I'm just gonna like, hit sign. And there's to the point where there's like add-ons you can get for your like browser that like turn that like gobbledygook into like, explain it to me like I'm 5 language, right?
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't be this difficult. So if we do this right, you can have these AI agents that will do all this stuff for you, and you don't have to worry about it. You just need to know what your end goal is, whether it be, to buy a dog with hat, or to like take your Solana and put it into like the highest yield contract that can be, that you can stake or whatever. Like those agents should be able to do that. And that all kind of came from the need that we had to make agents transact with one another in Colony.
What are the other aspects of AI inside of Web3 games, or games broadly speaking, that really interest you? And are there other kind of use cases that you're thinking of? I know recently, for example, there looked to be discussions between the NPCs inside of Parallel and players and stuff like that, which is, for us, it's a particular zone of interest. Like, we're obsessed with how to build emotional connections between humans and AI NPCs. That's like a major part of what we, certainly what I think about before I'm going to sleep at night. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering what kind of other interesting use cases that you're seeing at the moment, and if there are things that are on the horizon there. Like, it's quite clear that we don't know the full impact of some of the introduction of these technologies into games. I mean, for AI agents, who knows what that's going to do? Like that could have a massive change on crypto broadly speaking, finance broadly speaking. There's huge amounts of use cases and different ways that can go. But I'm wondering, where's your head at with AI and video games?
So there's a couple of things, right? Like, I think that we've obviously reached the same conclusion as companies, that like the stickiness in some of this is building a connection between this in-game character and the end user. So like in Colony, a lot of the game loops exist to continue to get the user to continue playing, but like the end goal is really the relationship built between the AI agent and the player. So I think that like makes a lot of sense, and I think that's like a huge use case for this stuff. Obviously, people talk about like making RPGs more in depth with like the same way that we can have procedurally generated maps, you can have like procedurally generated quests that are like outside the realm of the original scope of what the developers have developed. But honestly, I think that there is like a piece that maybe it's so simple that people are like, who cares? But I think it's going to be the biggest use case for AI that there is. Okay, so we're both old enough to remember that when the internet first started to boom in the 90s, people used to have to create websites by writing code. Like, you literally would just sit there with like a text file or whatever and write code to create a website. And people were getting paid obscene amounts of money to create these websites, right? And then like Adobe came out with like Dreamweaver or whatever it was, and it's like,
great name, by the way, Dreamweaver, right?
Holy shit, like you can just drag this picture where you want it on the site, and it's like crazy. And now we have all these, insane online tools. You can just like go to Wix or whatever and completely design your website through a website on the internet, right? Like it's like the snake eating its own tail or something, which is like amazing. But I think one of the things that people really, really, really overlook when it comes to AI is it's going to democratize or whatever the ability to make games, right? Now, if you are somebody who has a really great idea for a game, at the very least, you'd be able to play and prototype pretty quickly without needing to know a goddamn thing about Unity, about Unreal, about whatever. It's just like, hey, I have this idea for a game. I want it to be blah, 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 blah. And I think we're not that far off from the AI being like, okay, here's like a somewhat working version of the game that you want. Obviously, it depends on how in-depth your game loops are and, you know, whatever. It's like not going to create Baldur's Gate 3 for you probably, but like, could it create Super Mario for you? Probably, right? And especially now with like the sort of like, I don't want to say indie game explosions. I think indie games have always been huge. We talked about it. My favorite game ever is like The Binding of Isaac, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like,
Great
could
game.
it create that game? Maybe, yeah, it might. You know, could it create mods for Binding of Isaac? Like almost certainly, right?
Yep.
And so like, it now makes it so that anyone with a good idea doesn't need like a mountain of capital to at least show the world what that idea is like. And so I think what we're gonna see is like, now it's gonna be about, I mean, maybe this is just me like playing my own trumpet or whatever, but like it's gonna be about game design more than anything else, right? Then the execution comes after because you can show people this is what I wanna do. And I think that's gonna like change the gaming industry in a huge way.
I think so as well, man. I think that you're totally on it with the aspects of the democratization of creativity. And I think we've seen aspects of this before. You know, like one of the difficulties all creators have is the gap between what's in their brain and being able to use like a technical tool, you know, whether it's modeling or whether it's a game engine, or in some cases when you think about musicians, right, you might have some amazing, you know, beautiful melodies inside your brain, but you're like, well, I just don't play piano, so I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
You know? But when you're able to kind of skip some of those more technical aspects, what it does is it liberates people to be more creative, but also, you know, democratizes the actual creation of the you know, the budgets that are required to make some of these creations are able to shrink. So it becomes more about in the realms of like the ideas man, where someone who, or a woman who's able to come up with something that they really think is a unique, awesome thing, and then work with generative technology to be able to build it. I think like, you know, overarchingly, that's going to create like a whole new vast opportunity for game developers and people who want to get into video games.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like the cell phone camera or just digital cameras in general. I think that like, you know, less people watch as much TV or movies as they did now, and there's like a ton of people watching YouTube and Twitch or one of these, you know, or TikTok is another great example. Like the way that people consume content is different. I mean, once today the game gets sold to whatever giant conglomerate and someone buys Parallel Studios, we should make the like YouTube of AI generated games or the Newgrounds 2.0 or whatever, right? Like that's, I think, where things are gonna go, where it's just like, hey, in the same way that like Flash games and Newgrounds, like, but now it's on a whole different level. Like you could probably play like actual quality, not that those games weren't quality, but like actual quality games, it, you know, born out of someone's crazy idea because they just have the tools to be able to do it at home. They don't need to go to school for years. They don't need to hire people to like make it happen. I think it's gonna be insane.
Nice. Last question before we tied up. What's next for you guys? You guys have recently announced a funding round with a whole bunch of amazing investors. You know, Prime is one of the best performing tokens that's out there on the market. People are so hyped about what's happening with Colony. The trading card game has absolutely crushed it as well. What next for you folks?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to bring Colony to the world. We want to bring Wayfinder to the world. And I'll say this, okay? In the same way that Colony was born out of an idea that one of our guys had on the side that was like, hey, this is an interesting thing that I want to play with. In the same way that we find good ideas within the company and run with them, there might be a few other good ideas that we haven't talked about that we're like cooking up some stuff here. So, you know, keep your eyes and ears to the ground because Parallel might be working on more stuff. It just means that I'll never sleep. But
Nice, brother. Kohji, great chat, man. Thanks so much for doing the interview.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by and making the time for me. I know my schedule is like terrible. So.
No, it was great, man. Great. Really enjoyed the conversation.